In the world of the Blackwoods, image is everything. My father, Silas Blackwood, is known as the King of Diamonds. To the public, he is a philanthropist, a man of grace and immense wealth. To me, he is the man who looked at my mother's casket and then at his watch, wondering if he'd make it to his 4 p.m. board meeting. I am Luna, the daughter from his first marriage, the mistake he tries to hide. For 10 years I was exiled to the Greystone Military Academy, a place where the wind screams and the discipline is designed to break the strongest souls. My father told the world I was recovering from a fragile mental state. In reality, he just didn't want my plain face ruining the family's perfect aesthetic. I stood at the massive iron gates of the Blackwood estate, my single military duffel bag slung over my shoulder. No driver was sent to pick me up. I had walked 3 miles from the train station in the pouring rain. As I entered the grand foyer, the scent of expensive lilies and floor wax hit me like a slap in the face. My 2 half-sisters, Bianca and Bella, were standing at the top of the marble staircase, looking down at me like I was a stray dog that had accidentally wandered into a museum. "Oh, look, the soldier returns," Bianca sneered, adjusting her $50,000 diamond necklace. "You smell like wet pavement and failure, Luna. Did they teach you how to wash in that pathetic school, or just how to crawl in the mud?" Bella giggled, her phone out, recording me for her millions of followers. "Don't get too close, Bianca. Look at her boots, they covered in dirt. 1 step on this rug costs more than her entire life's worth." I didn't say a word. I simply looked at them. In the academy, I had learned to read people's heartbeats by watching the pulse in their necks. Bianca's pulse was fast. She was insecure. Bella's was steady. She was a sociopath. I walked past them, my heavy boots thudding rhythmically on the marble, a sound that seemed to disturb the very air of the house. I found my father in the dining hall, surrounded by architects and gemstone experts. He didn't even stand up. "You're late for lunch," Silas said, his voice cold and sharp. "And you look like a common laborer. I've tolerated your presence back here only because your mother's lawyer insisted. The Blackwood inheritance will be read tomorrow. Until then, stay in the attic. And Luna?" I stopped at the door. "Yes, father?" "The Heart of the Ocean Gala is tonight. Every major investor in the world will be here. Stay in your room. If a single guest sees you looking like that, I will ensure you go back to that academy for another 10 years. "I understand, father," I said, my voice as flat as a grave. I've always been good at staying in the dark. The attic was freezing, but it was perfect. It overlooked the entire estate, giving me a tactical view of the security patrols. But I wasn't there to sleep. Once the house became a chaotic mess of caterers and florists, I slipped into the basement. I knew the blueprints of this house better than anyone. I had memorized them from my mother's old architectural drafts. I found the wall behind the wine cellar, where the bricks felt slightly colder. Using a small specialized frequency device I'd built at the academy, I located the hollow point. With a silent mechanical click, a hidden door slid open. This was my mother's secret vault. She was a master gem cutter, the one who actually built the Blackwood fortune while Silas took the credit. The room smelled of old cedar and ozone. On the central table sat a heavy, dusty iron box with a complex refraction lock. A lock that could only be opened by shining light through a specific gemstone at a specific angle. I pulled out the small uncut stone I had carried in my pocket for a decade, the only thing my mother left me. I placed it in the slot. A beam of moonlight from a tiny vent hit the stone, split into 7 colors, and hit the sensors. Clang! Inside the box wasn't just gold. It was a set of ledgers written in my mother's hand and a high-definition microdrive. The first page of the ledger read, "Silas thinks he killed me to keep the secret. He doesn't know that the diamonds he's selling to the world are nothing but high-grade synthetic trash. The real wealth, the natural stones, he has been smuggling out of the country to fund a private militia. If you are reading this, Luna, you are the only one who can stop the Blackwood name from becoming a curse." Suddenly, the cold air in the basement felt even colder. I heard the distinct click-clack of a safety being turned off on a pistol. "You always were too smart for your own good, just like your mother," a voice growled from the shadows. It was Victor, my father's head of security, the man who had personally driven me to the academy 10 years over. He stepped into the dim light, his silenced weapon pointed at my head. "The boss said if you found the vault, I should finish the job he started 20 years ago," Victor said, his finger tightening on the trigger. "Sorry, Luna, but shadows don't get to inherit kingdoms." I didn't panic. My heart rate didn't even speed up. I looked at the microdrive in my hand, then at Victor's stance. He was leaning on his right leg, an old injury. "You should have stayed in the ballroom, Victor," I said softly. "The music is much better there than the sound of your own bones breaking." Victor laughed, a dry, rasping sound that echoed off the damp basement walls. "Bones breaking? Luna, you've been playing soldier in a schoolyard. I've been killing people since before you could walk. Now give me the drive and the ledger, and maybe I'll make it quick." I didn't move. I kept my eyes locked on his. "You know, Victor, the first thing they teach you at Greystone isn't how to shoot. It's how to use your environment. This room? It was built by a gem cutter. It's full of mirrors and angles." Victor's eyes flickered for a fraction of a second, confused. That was all I needed. I kicked the heavy iron box off the table. As it hit the floor with a thunderous clang, Victor flinched. I lunged forward, not for him, but for the overhead industrial light chain. I yanked it, and the single bulb began to swing violently, creating chaotic, shifting shadows. Victor fired. Pht! Pht! The silenced bullets hissed past my ear, embedding themselves into the wooden shelves behind me. I didn't run away. I ran into his space. I used his height against him, diving low and driving my shoulder into his injured right knee. I heard the sickening pop of a ligament tearing. Victor roared in pain, swinging the butt of his pistol at my skull. I blocked it with my forearm, the bone bruising instantly, and countered with a palm strike to his throat. He gasped, his airway momentarily collapsing. I grabbed his wrist, twisted it until the gun clattered to the floor, and delivered a spinning back kick that sent him crashing into a rack of old glass carboys. Shards of glass exploded everywhere, slicing through his suit. Victor lay on the floor, gasping for air, blood pooling around his head. I picked up his pistol and checked the chamber. "You're right, Victor," I whispered, standing over him as the blue light from my mother's stone reflected in my eyes. Shadows don't inherit kingdoms. They dismantle them. I didn't kill him. I took his zip ties and bound his hands and feet to the heavy workbench. I grabbed the ledger, the microdrive, and my mother's blue star stone. I had work to do. Above me, the house was vibrating with the sound of a live orchestra and the chatter of 1,000 wealthy guests. The Heart of the Ocean Gala was in full swing. I made my way to the attic using the laundry chute. I didn't have a gown, but I had something better. In my duffel bag was the formal officer's dress uniform from the academy, a sharp midnight black jacket with silver buttons and a high collar. It looked more like armor than clothing. I tied my hair back into a tight, lethal bun and wiped the dirt and Victor's blood from my face. I slipped into the servants' corridor and intercepted a waiter carrying a tray of champagne. "I'll take that," I said, my voice commanding. The waiter, intimidated by the intensity in my eyes and the military uniform, simply handed over the tray. I walked into the grand ballroom. The transition from the dark, damp basement to the blinding light of the gala was jarring. Thousands of diamonds sparkled under the massive chandeliers, but to my trained eyes they looked dull. I knew the truth now. Half of these stones were high-grade fakes. In the center of the room, my father, Silas, stood on a raised platform next to a velvet-covered pedestal. My sisters, Bianca and Bella, stood on either side of him like golden statues. "Ladies and gentlemen," Silas announced, his voice booming with fake sincerity. "Tonight, we unveil the largest natural diamond ever found, the Blackwood heart, a stone that represents the strength and purity of our family." He reached for the velvet cloth. "That stone is as fake as your soul, father," I said. My voice wasn't loud, but the military training gave it a resonance that cut through the music. The orchestra faltered and stopped. 1,000 heads turned. I walked through the crowd, the sea of silk and tuxedos parting for me like I was a ghost. I stepped onto the platform, placing the tray of champagne on the pedestal next to the diamond. "Luna?" Bianca hissed, her face turning pale. "What are you doing? Security! Get this soldier out of here!" "Security is currently tied up in the basement, Bianca," I said, looking her in the eye until she flinched. I turned to my father. Silas was trembling with rage, his knuckles white as he gripped the podium. "You've lost your mind, Luna. Leave now, and I might not send you to prison." "I'm not leaving, Silas. I'm just here for the inheritance reading," I said, pulling the microdrive from my pocket. I looked at the massive projector screen behind him, which was currently showing a slideshow of his charity work. "And I think the guests would love to see what's really in the Blackwood vaults." I walked over to the tech booth. The technician tried to stop me, but one look at the pistol tucked into my waistband, which I made sure he saw, made him back away. I plugged the drive in. 20 years ago, you killed my mother because she found out you were replacing real gems with glass to fund your private wars," I said into the microphone, my voice echoing in the dead silent room. "Tonight, the King of Diamonds is going to be unmasked." The screen flickered. It didn't show diamonds. It showed bank transfers to arms dealers. It showed the chemical formulas for the synthetic stones. And finally, it showed a video my mother had recorded in her final hours. A video of Silas Blackwood admitting that he had sabotaged her car. The gasp from the crowd was like a physical wave. Silas looked at the screen, then at the elite guests who were now backing away from him in disgust. "This is a lie," Silas screamed, his face contorting. "She's a sick girl, a fraud." "The only fraud here is you," I said, pulling the real blue star stone from my pocket and holding it up. The light from the chandeliers hit the raw stone, and a beam of pure, natural blue light cut through the room, making the fake Blackwood heart on the pedestal look like a piece of cheap plastic in comparison. Suddenly, the front doors of the ballroom burst open. It wasn't security. It was the Federal Diamond Commission and the police. The ballroom was a sea of panic. High society guests, terrified of being associated with a criminal empire, scrambled for the exits. The police and federal agents swarmed the floor, their heavy boots a rhythmic counterpoint to the screeching violence that had been knocked over in the chaos. Silas Blackwood didn't go down like a gentleman. As the handcuffs clicked onto the wrists of his business associates, he grabbed the fake Blackwood heart diamond from the pedestal and lunged toward the service exit behind the stage. "You won't take everything from me," he roared, his eyes bloodshot with madness. "I built this. This is my kingdom." I didn't let the police handle him. This was personal. I tracked him through the winding corridors of the mansion, my military boots silent on the carpet. I knew every shortcut. I intercepted him on the helipad on the roof of the North Wing. The wind was howling, and a private helicopter was already warming up its rotors, the blades slicing through the rain. Silas was halfway to the door when I stepped into the floodlights. "The flight's cancelled, Father," I said, my voice steady despite the gale. Silas turned, the fake diamond clutched in his hand like a holy relic. He pulled a backup derringer from his ankle holster. "You ruined it, Luna. You were supposed to stay in that academy and rot. Why couldn't you just stay dead like your mother?" "Because my mother taught me how to cut through flaws," I said, stepping closer, ignoring the gun pointed at my chest. "And you are the biggest flaw of all." Silas pulled the trigger. Click. The gun jammed. The rain and the lack of maintenance had rendered his last line of defense useless. I didn't even flinch. I moved with the speed of a striking cobra, disarming him and pinning his arm behind his back in one fluid motion. I didn't throw him off the roof. That would have been too easy. I forced him to look down at the driveway, where the blue and red lights of a dozen police cars were reflecting in the puddles. "Look at them, Silas," I whispered in his ear. "That's your new audience, and they aren't here for the diamonds." While Silas was being dragged away in chains, Bianca and Bella were found in the master suite, frantically trying to stuff millions of dollars worth of jewelry into designer suitcases. They were stopped by federal agents. Because they had knowingly profited from the fraud and helped cover up the evidence of the Blue Star theft, they weren't just losing their home, they were losing their freedom. "Luna, tell them!" Bianca screamed as she was led out in handcuffs, her perfect makeup ruined by tears. "We're sisters! You can't let them do this!" I stood in the foyer, watching them go. "We were never sisters, Bianca. You were just shadows of a man who never loved you. I'm the only one who learned how to live in the dark." 1 month later, The Blackwood estate was no longer a monument to greed. I had used my mother's hidden trust and the evidence of the fraud to cooperate with the authorities. The company was liquidated, the victims of the insurance scams were compensated, and the blood diamond trade Silas had funded was dismantled. I stood in my mother's old studio, which was now filled with sunlight. The boards had been ripped off the windows. The blue star stone, the real one, sat on the workbench. It wasn't for sale. It was a reminder. I had traded my military uniform for a simple, sharp suit. I was the head of the Vesta Foundation, a non-profit dedicated to ethical gemstone mining and protecting children in war-torn regions, the very places my father had helped destroy. A knock came at the door. It was my new head of security, a woman I had recruited from the Greystone Academy. "The board is waiting, Miss Blackwood," she said. "Call me Luna," I replied, picking up my mother's old gem-cutting tool. I looked at my reflection in the window. The girl who was sent away to be forgotten was now the only one the world remembered. I wasn't an outcast anymore. I wasn't a shadow. I was the one who held the light. The Blackwood name was dead. Long live the legacy of the stone.